Hello, this is Andrew from editing the podcast. I want to apologize because for those who are watching on YouTube, there were a section that I needed to cut out to ensure that I could export this. This is because we are using a new podcast solution and I'm still learning on how to edit it. Unfortunately, this section got corrupted just for the YouTube. If you want to hear the full podcast, I would recommend listening on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. That's because they didn't need the transcript to be able to export. For YouTube, it does. So there will be a section which gets cut off where Reed is talking about where a client was using ChatGPT, which was quite hilarious. But unfortunately, the only way to get this exported was for me to do this edit. I apologize to Reed for this, and I hope that this doesn't happen again in the future.
Welcome to Digital After Dark with your hosts, Matt and Andrew.
Hello, and welcome back to another Digital After Dark. On this episode, we're going to be talking about data automation for marketing. So first, I want to introduce my co-host, Matt. Hello. And it's also another special episode because this is the first time we've actually have a guest who reached out and asked to come onto the podcast that Matt and I have never worked with before. So I want to introduce Reed. Reed is the
Hello.
chief, sorry for that. So Reed is the chief growth officer at Market Surge, which Reed acquired in 2024. At Market Surge, their mission is to empower businesses with innovative marketing solutions that drive growth, enhance customer retention, and simplify operations. Reed is a seasoned digital marketing executive with extensive experience driving business growth through innovative strategies. As the chief growth officer at Market Surge, Reed focuses on leveraging digital marketing tools to help businesses scale efficiently, especially in high competitive markets. Reed's unique ability to combine data driven insights with creative marketing solutions makes Reed a recognized authority in the digital marketing space. Additionally, Reed is the host of the Inside Marketing with Market Surge podcast, breaking down the latest marketing and business news minus the fluff to explore tech trends you need to know and features unfiltered conversations with the most interesting minds in entrepreneurship and marketing. And it is the unfiltered part that makes Reed such a great guest on this episode. Reed's career has been built helping businesses of all sizes to achieve remarkable sales growth through digital innovation. Reed, thank you so much for agreeing to come on to this podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here and really flattered that you'd have me. That was such a nice intro. Maybe too glossy, but I'll take it.
Ah, well, as our first guest on that, had, Matt and I have never worked with, I decided I wanted to really roll out the red carpet. And thank you so much for sending that email to ask to come on.
Thank you.
How would you describe yourself, Reed?
I'm just your every man marketer. Just put on a hard hat and bring my lunch pail to work every day. But yeah, no, I love marketing. I love meeting interesting people and learning new things, and really enjoy seeing businesses thrive.
I absolutely love working with the marketing team because they're the ones who always want to really push the boundaries of what we can do on digital. So it's going to be a really great time talking with you about what is automation in marketing.
Great.
So, and I think really that's probably where we're going to start off. What
Yeah.
is automation for marketing? Now,
Yeah.
Reed?
So, when we talk about automation, often our minds go to like physical automation, like has happened in manufacturing and logistics industries. And marketing is a lot less tangible. It's a lot of it is around communication and messaging and people's emotions, and memories and experiences around brands. So you're like, well, what do you automate there? You automate the creation of a feeling. Well, we probably stick more to the communication part of the automation, and there are several touch points between a brand and an individual, I think largely enabled by the internet and then accelerated greatly by AI. And those touch points include emails, they include the phone and text and digital signage, advertising, interactions on purchase pages. All of those things can be preset or pre-programmed to interact with a client depending on their behavior or depending on potentially a demographic or a past interaction. That would be largely the category of things that can be automated. There are other parts of the marketing process like content creation that can also be automated. Primarily what comes to mind is those real time or timed and or intelligent conversations that happen without a human having to make an on the spot action or decision.
That's exactly what I was going to touch on is the fact that when we're talking about automation, there needs to be a complete removal of the human element from this. It's not about, oh, well, it's just I'm sending this one file in on a daily basis. But what if you happen to forget to send that file? What happens if you're sick or, oh my God, the internet's down, you can't send it? There needs to be a way to be able to remove any of this human error from it to make it fully automated.
Yeah, absolutely. Another common scenario that I run into with a lot of my clients are, say a small and medium sized business, you take like a plumber, for example. A plumber frequently has his hands occupied and is unable to accept a phone call of a new client. So, what do you do then? Do you just not acknowledge somebody needs help later that day? No, there are tools and processes to help enable the sales conversation to continue.
And I think probably one of the more common ones that people see nowadays is the abandoned basket, where you
Yes.
go in and you start to have a journey and then you stop and then suddenly you get a text message or an email or something to entice you to come back and, oh, and here's an extra 10%. I'll admit, in the last 2 weeks, I fell for that and I did take that 10% and they did earn my business from it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it can be very effective. It can another one too is it can be stacked on promotions. So say like you've sent out a promotional email and you can tell by say a pixel installed in the email that they either opened the email, opened it multiple times, or maybe clicked on one of the links in the email. But you also have the data point that that person didn't purchase. And so, just like an abandoned cart, you can send a second email. Here's 10 more percent off, and you automate the reaction to their behavior. And it can be magical when done at volume and done effectively.
Obviously, in the market that we're working in Europe, and then under CCPA and similar legislation in the US, and I'm going to mention Safari and intelligent tracking prevention as well.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of that ability to connect the marketing campaign to the conversion, for example, and all of the journey steps in between, it is becoming broken. How much are you finding that you're relying on user identification, so like an identity graph or, something that you might host in a CDP that identifies the end user directly, particularly in digital where that becomes quite difficult versus like automation via contextual marketing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Fortunately, in the US, we haven't fully implemented the extent of the regulations you described, and so most of my experience will be from the American regulatory perspective. We typically rely on so I don't like to overemphasize marketing to individuals that have not opted into communications. And
Yeah, of course.
just there's a lot of it. We receive you, you and Andrew and I all receive a lot of unsolicited communications, regardless. But I've just found that the percentages are getting lower and lower of response rates and interaction rates. The big email providers are filtering their their filtering systems are getting more and more restrictive. So I almost focus exclusively on current past clients, those that have reached out, completed a web form and opted in. So a lot of my efforts using, say, ads or what are rather than drive straight to a sale page or a sale flow is to get them to first opt in for like a free promotion piece of information, a lead magnet interaction, just for the sake of growing a database of people that have opted in, so we can
Yeah,
cultivate those over
absolutely.
time.
Like data building campaigns to build up those profiles.
Exactly. Yeah. Because I mean, to your point, we're fighting upstream against huge regulatory efforts to stop the spam in the inboxes, and regardless of how well we define a ideal customer, I think really we need to go more and more on behavior, like the choice to opt in rather than the straight demographics.
And are you sort of talking more around opting into marketing preferences, or are you taking into consideration like cookie banner type opting? Because I guess there's two, isn't there? There's
Yeah, that's
you know,
true.
you land on the site and you can be an anonymous user. The website owner doesn't know who you are, but you're
Hmm.
essentially a cookied user. So there is an identifier. We just don't know who you are, but we can sort of track you from page view to page view, visit to visit, from like a digital perspective. Then there's actual marketing sort of CRM level opt-ins where there's now a user profile. So I guess how would you deal with those two situations differently, like where you've got an anonymous user base versus a known user base?
Great question. I mean, both are very useful for understanding the steps you need to take to optimize your website. When I'm talking about triggered and intelligent communications that are then automated, primarily I work with almost exclusively, I work with those that have opted in to marketing communications. There's a whole world of data that is collected with those cookies on within the flow of the website, Google Analytics and other analytics tools. And that's separate. I just don't necessarily use those for communication triggers.
Which is difficult because I mean you either need third party cookie, you need some sort of identifier, whether it's a authenticated actual user identifier like a hashed email address, or you need some sort of cookie.
Right.
And then third party cookies are, being basically phased out. So
Right.
that option that goes away. So you're very much in the first party identifiable user space. Is that
I am, yes.
okay? Great,
Yeah.
great.
Just, and I think that's just the way that the world and the market is going. And,
Yeah, great.
it is tricky to do that at volume, but it does, I think, inform your efforts. Like you do need to network, you do need to participate in or create communities where you are getting a lot of people to opt in because you're offering value.
Well, that brought me to another thought, which is, do you do much with? Because I think, well, there's two really good points actually that came out of what you just said, and I'm wondering which one to go for first. But
Yeah.
do you do? I guess you kind of touched on it. Like, what kind of activity do you do to drive people to identify themselves?
Yeah. Yeah. Great questions. So there's a few things we like to do, but the concept of the lead magnet is really helpful. It's a there's a few different ways it can manifest. Sometimes opted in to do a personality test or an IQ test or whatever it is, and you sign into a free website, and usually it's gated by you have to provide your email address and your name, and you probably don't think there's any harm in it. Maybe there's not, but the purpose of the reason they created that interaction was to get your contact information
Absolutely.
for further use. Now, what we try to do is create real value. So, in the case of a photographer, for instance, I was working with a boudoir photographer, and we created a quiz where it said, define your boudoir type, and are you like sweet and fun or sultry, and we went through and asked several questions
I'm
and
definitely sultry.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'll send you the link after.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%.
It was a fun client, absolutely. But at the end, they got a report and kind of a one-page download that they could see some examples of poses and backdrops and outfits, and it was harmless fun and felt personalized, and it gave them several steps to actually contemplate and visualize themselves doing a boudoir shoot. So it was effective in mobilizing the brain towards a purchase. So it helped actually move the sales conversation to a point of consideration, and they also had a little bit of value, and so it was a good trade and gave us license to or permission to reach out and solicit a follow-up call, and worked great. And we can definitely do that with other industries. I worked with a cosmetic dentist, and we did something similar along those lines, like, upload a headshot, and we could kind of slide pieces over their teeth as we zoomed in, and to help visualize what certain implants could look like on their smile. And essentially, we do create these interactions. We use some JavaScript tools, or uh, we're now working on doing apps that synthesize a little bit, analyze some unstructured data in forms, and ask the AI, like OpenAI, to synthesize it and produce some more analysis. Like, the example is, I created a uh, so this is for other marketers, but had a questionnaire that would produce a one-page document of your ideal customer profile, and give it a name and generate an AI image of what this person looks like, and compared to other characteristics. So it's these kinds of valuable things, though, do help boost those numbers of people that are willing to listen to you.
Yeah, and give you the data to contact them. I mean, I love that. I guess that leads on to a really, I guess for me, a sort of obvious follow-on question, because that sounds expensive. So I get the feeling. So do you work a lot with like SMEs, sort of small to medium-sized enterprises? Is that fair?
I do, and
Okay.
it helps that I've worked with, for instance, a lot of photographers, and so we
Yeah.
did build that lead magnet once, and we've deployed it, uh, you know, 30 to 40 times across, excuse me, across
Yeah.
different studios.
So that was what I
So
was that was
yeah,
kind of where I was leading into is have you found, I mean, I was going down a kind of AI route, but actually
yeah,
it's an automation route.
it is.
Are you finding that with your ability to template the things that you've built and then reuse them, that you're able to get that to a price point that is acceptable?
Absolutely. And so, when I think to many it would appear like, oh wow, this is a little custom app project, but it actually, it's the use of a like an open source survey tool combined with the CDN, and we were able to just replicate it, swap out images and branding, and just do it for under $2,000 per deployment. And it's
Wow,
great tool,
thanks.
great value. So
That's really
um,
cool.
yeah, yeah, but but the potential of AI, we're doing more and more coding. I am not a developer, but I have been using this cursor, and doing a lot of apps in that realm. Like, for instance, I created that ideal customer profile with using cursor, and I was able to get it to production level, hosted on AWS. So it's amazing what is coming down the pipe.
No, I completely agree. I mean, two that I use quite a lot. I've got I'm closer to a developer maybe, but
Sure.
definitely not a and like not a full blown developer, a data developer probably I would
Okay.
describe myself as.
Yeah.
But I definitely the AI integration with GitHub,
Oh,
the
yeah.
GitHub Copilot,
Mhm.
is fantastic. Just code completion. It was going to do the thing that you were going to do anyway, but instead of you spending an hour typing it out, it does it in 10 seconds. It's like a
That's
huge
great.
time saver. And then the other one was you just getting to know a coding language in a different context. So I'm very, very familiar with JavaScript, but getting to know JavaScript in an application setting, and something like Node.js, familiar with, like, because I'm building sort of components that interact with each other. And again, the AI was hugely helpful in that. So I guess that falls under automation as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's tremendous, and I feel so empowered by some of these platforms. I would like to try that GitHub, and just there's just so much possibility, and it's both daunting and very exciting.
No, it's $100 for a year, so it
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
doesn't break the bank. I,
No.
um, I just bought my own in the end. I didn't even
Oh,
charge it back
awesome.
to the company.
Yeah, that's the way to do it, and I think we all owe it to ourselves and our careers to be very, very familiar with AI and what's happening.
Yeah, 100%.
Now, I know whenever Reed and we talked about this earlier on, I automatically thought about UMAP because I remember us being together in Leeds where I just got done talking to you about Adam Greco's session at Measure Camp where he was talking about how do you move from being a thermometer where you're just reporting what the temperature is to a thermostat where you're actually changing what the future is.
Mm.
And you mentioned how this is something that you've been preaching quite a lot, where you want to take digital data and automatically just pump it into things like marketing to be able to automate it and actually take it from a cost center to a profit center.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, because I really loved how you put it. I wanted to just give you the floor to talk a little bit more around this pipeline. And I
Yeah.
wanted to actually just wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing it with the rest.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Reed, I'd love to get your thoughts on it because it's almost kind of does it spark anything in the field that you're working in? A bit of a backstory, but I mean, obviously, I'm running a digital analytics team and specifically an implementation team. Although we do a lot of other stuff, but like that's our main focus of implementing the data collection, so data layers and tag management and app implementation and so on. From a marketing perspective in terms of my team, my problem is always that there is a perception of digital analytics within the wider marketplace that it is a secondary or tertiary function. It's not a direct revenue driver. And so where I have been, I'm not going to say evangelical, that sounds awful. You know what I mean? Where
Yes.
where I try and promote it's just so cringy, but where I try and promote when I go to talks, when I do conference, and when I do these things and I go and talk to people, what I try to talk about is bringing that digital data and making it valuable and demonstrating the value, and then you can tie revenue generation directly back to your digital data. So it's almost coming at it from the flip side of the coin. So I think what Andrew is referring to is like, and it's a really obvious example, but let's say that your digital analytics is considered as a tertiary function. It's not a direct
Mhm.
revenue driver.
Mhm.
However, you have a basket abandonment program that requires a encrypted email to be sent to an endpoint so that it can be decrypted and within a certain time frame, let's say half an hour, an email can be sent to the user to remind them of the fact that they have an abandoned basket. And you know that without that particular data point, the basket abandonment process doesn't work, and the basket abandonment process is worth $50 million a year. Suddenly, digital analytics isn't a secondary or tertiary function anymore, and actually, your data collection has a value. And what I try to drive the team to do, and actually it feeds into the kind of audit. So people will come to us and ask us to audit their analytics implementation, their data collection implementation. Is I try to look at the things that they collect and put a cash value on them. So this is driving this much revenue, and it's within certain tolerances. It's not going to be accurate, but the idea is to give a feel for what your data is worth. And I guess I'm wondering, do you do something similar? Do you try, do you, or is it intrinsic in terms of kind of understanding what the data is worth to the user? Sorry, to the client, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with Moneyball, the book and the
Yes.
movie, and and I feel like I work with a lot of clients that are purely going by gut, and they're confident in what works and what doesn't, and maybe I think instinctively resistant to having like real data inform their decisions. So whether it's like creative professionals or people that have been doing they're specialists in their business and they've been doing it a long time. They are um, just they like to feel and observe and take their own conclusions and let that. So I do feel like I am working uphill with a lot of business owners because they were emphasizing something else in their professional training, and either they never really learned the value of statistical analysis, or they never had to use it. What I do is I kind of do the spoon feeding approach, and introduce some, first, like, let's look at the your revenue collected, and then we'll break it down into go more granular, and then also start to break it down by channel, by email approach, and then introduce A/B testing for email campaigns, and say, like, well, we can actually see that if we tweak this subject line or the timing here, then we can deliver you more money. Then that becomes a little bit more receptive. It's hard to just say, like, well, hey, I could make a lot of decisions for you, or have our system make those decisions for you. When they say, like, well, no, my clients want to be reached via, only want calls, they don't want texts, and or they don't want emails, they like print mail. So it, it's interesting. I've gotten there with some of our longtime clients over 4 and 5 years that have been with the agency, even prior to my owning the agency. But every new client, we it seems like we have to start over and introduce some of these principles.
It never goes away. So
Right. Right.
I mean, an example of something similar, but at a multi-billion uh, dollar company might be a development process. So
Hmm.
a product development process. And
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't one client or another, but the number of places where you see a product development process that doesn't test and learn. So something like Spotify, for example, when they
Hmm.
develop a new product, they feature flag it. It was another guest of ours, a guy called John Crowder, who's and when you mentioned A/B testing, I mean that's 100%, like we're fully on board with that.
Hmm.
And John is director at a company called Journey Further for their experimentation program, and he used Spotify as as an example where everything that they build, absolutely everything is tested. It's nothing goes
Oh.
live to do 100% of the customer base, and they feature flag everything so that things are switched off and they're switched on, and then it's very easy to put things in and back them out again. The number of multi-billion dollar clients that we work with, their development process is based on speed of delivery.
Mhm.
So it's just purely how quickly can I build the feature and get it out of the door, and that's what the development teams are benchmarked on, which doesn't actually bake in improved performance. It bakes in speed of delivery because your your primary KPI is speed of delivery. So actually, improvement in performance and improvement in customer experience and improvement in conversion rate and revenue generation isn't part of that. And so the number of times where we're that uphill battle that you're talking about, where we're saying that use the data, build these products in a way in which they can be tested. And yes, you may have spent, you know, $100,000 on developing the product, but if you release it and it costs you $50 million, then not releasing it is a good thing. So actually, test whether or not this thing that you built is actually beneficial. So yes, that uphill battle doesn't really change um,
Yeah.
based on scale.
Yeah, but I mean, that is a tragedy. A company like Spotify. I mean, imagine the rich data that they have about consumers, and to kind of glaze over that and just focus on speed. I don't know. Maybe there's a key member of the board that just wants to wants
So
that
that
in the annual report or
well,
something.
so they don't. I mean, that's the thing is they are very much because everyone. So they're the paragon. They're the example that was given
Yeah.
of guys who were doing it right. But
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. To your point, imagine if they didn't.
Right.
And the amount
Right.
of the amount of lost revenue that would get, particularly because like you look at some of these businesses, Spotify being one, Meta, Facebook being another, Apple being a third, where everybody's logged in. You know,
Hmm.
they're within your ecosystem. So everything you do is identifiable. I think that must be a wonderland of
Right.
opportunity.
Right. And they're like all time stamped. It's like that's which uh that's remarkable. I would love to work in that world. Like I mentioned before, most of my clients aren't dealing in the billions and trillions of interactions, unfortunately. And so uh, I think it makes it all the much harder to uh, compel that because they could have one outlier large sale, something that happened that was unusual, maybe in a good way, that they all of a sudden will just remember for years that that's the way it's done. And, and so it's almost like the more data, um, but you'd have to tell me, but the more data, does it make it easier to make the case for data-driven decision making?
I was gonna
Yeah,
say, Matt, on this one, I think there's a difference between more data and more volume of data.
Sure. Hmm.
So if you have too much data points, then you're just going to get into data paralysis where you just have too much to shift through. But if you just have a lot of volume of consistent data, then it does, in my mind, make things easier because you could test faster, fail faster, and make decisions much quicker. So I worked before where we used to have millions and millions of hits a day, then went to a private banking where the amount of traffic that we got in a year at this private banking was what we would get in a single day on one of the platforms at Sky.
Oh,
So
wow.
it the amount of time it took us to be able to get the confidence that this test actually worked there just took longer.
Yeah, I could see that. That makes sense.
yeah. I mean, you make a really really good point. So volume, pure volume of data, particularly with an A/B testing program, is always going to be a limiting factor because the bread and butter of an A/B testing program is statistical significance. And granted, you can reduce your threshold for acceptance. So you could say, actually, we're going to accept 60% statistical significance instead of 90.
Yeah.
But even so, y- it will still take time to get there if you purely don't have the volume, and particularly if you're testing things that are further down the consideration journey funnel, where you're by the very nature of those journeys, you're receiving less data. I think there's almost a political or a philosophical point to the question that you asked, which is does it does it make a difference in terms of kind of the way that people think about data, having more of it? No, not really. It very much depends on attitude, which is I think what you're alluding to. It
Yeah.
very much depends on attitude. People will happily disregard data even if it's absolutely nailed on. We we had we had a client where we ran an A/B test for them, and basically all the data said that it drove a massive increase in conversions, and they were just like, "Yeah, but that feels wrong." Just just get into the it's like, we're gonna
Wow. Yeah.
implement it anyway, but yeah, like they didn't give the guy who had brought us on his budget. He had a certain number of sales that he was supposed to generate, and this A/B test smashed it out of the park. Like he just generated the sales for the year, off the back of this particular test. And sometimes it can be that successful. If it's something that you just haven't done that it makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, and it did. We put this test in, and it was basically that was his sales figures for the year. And so they looked at it and went, "Nah, no, we're not accepting that." The maths backs it up, and the orders backs it up, and we saw an uptick, but we're not giving that to you. So you've still got to hit your sales
Wow.
targets.
Yeah, that's yeah, that is the problem. People want almost want to be experts more than they want the success or the on paper. Uh, I don't know. It's just yeah, but I have seen this before where it's like, you're we're clearly going by your intuition and the data says otherwise, but it feels better to them to continue on intuition. Uh, can be frustrating.
I
Yeah, Andrew,
also hate
I
it.
feel we've got off track from the
Sorry.
no, not at all, not at all. But I'm just sort of take a brief hiatus to try and get us back onto the bullet list.
You know what? The list is just there to give us the guidance if we need it. I mean, I think the conversation is going absolutely wonderful. But I mean, I think we've already talked about what is automation.
Mhm.
Um, the next one was why is this important, which we have been talking about because we're
Yeah.
talking about improved efficiency and speed for re-engagement, the real-time decision making, and that's something which I would love to talk about because I think the real-time decision making is one where a lot of people they get an idea on it, but they don't understand how real time it can actually get.
Yeah, you're right. If we're monitoring people's interactions with a website, they're able to move very quickly from website to website. And if our communication can match that pace, if it's a human that has to physically dial a phone number to call somebody back, that that does not match the speed that the consumer is browsing data or moving from website to website. And so the automation enables instantaneous dialing or uh, like real time reaction to the action they take on the website. Adding something to the cart or um, clicking on a certain link or inputting a certain code. So there's the speed of it is really critical.
I want to talk about something that Matt and we were part of a team at Sky 8 years ago that we helped deliver. And this gives you an idea, even back then, just how much you could do with technology and the speed. So we were working on a personalization program where a customer could go on to the website. As long as they were logged in, they could engage with a product and they may not complete it. They go 5 minutes later onto their app where they're logged in as the customer. And you could actually retarget that product they did just saw 5 minutes ago and saying, hey, do you want to buy this product? And that's just within 5 minutes of seeing it to on a completely new device.
Fantastic.
What so I mean obviously you mentioned around the speed of delivery. What kind of mechanisms would you use to because Andrew mentioned one, but like what kind of mechanisms would you use to get that speed of delivery? What kind of tools? What kind of sort of technological?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And so it is helpful to have integrated tools. I use a CRM uh, on behalf of my clients. And a lot of those work in a similar fashion. But nowadays we're able to automate phone calls. We're able to automate text messages and emails and web chats and have them all in a single view and treat those like across devices as a single conversation. The utility of having one engine drive all of those, and it could also be cobbled together if you used a tool like Make or Zapier. But basically, having receiving real time information about an interaction with a form or a certain website or a certain download, and associated that with an individual, then we're able to take instant action. There are tools that can do it. But it is key to think through the journey. Are they browsing certain sites because they're curious on the topic, or are they about to buy something? Following those anonymous paths and then tailoring those instant communications to that for opted in consumers is extremely valuable.
And do you take any of those CRM profiles
Hmm?
and push them up into any of the digital advertising platform? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, and so definitely do that. So we create a handful of audiences for our ad campaigns based on um, were they did they uh, fill out a form or do a consult call, solicited an estimate without buying. That's one audience, and that can go in a campaign to encourage them to make a purchase. Usually those are like time bound offers, like, oh, we have one spot left, or this discount is expiring this month, to inspire them to act. Others that they have purchased in the past, and we can create an audience for them to solicit referrals separately for repeat business. We use the CRM data to customize our ads approaches based on where they are in the sales cycle, including post sale. Yeah, and the timeliness, so that can be dynamically fed in. So a recent customer, recent purchase can be automatically added to a lookalike or a custom audience in our meta tools. And that can be automated through custom app, or you can use like a make to do that. But yeah, the integration of those systems is really important, and the timeliness of it, as you pointed out, is extremely important.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I kind of want to join two of the points together. It's what can we do with this automation and where do we see this could go in the future? Because to me, I feel like we can blend these quite nicely together.
More and more, there are tools for bridging offline actions with their online actions. Um, I've worked with a vendor that sends out printed mail, printed advertising. That's as old as the mail system itself, but includes a lot of promo codes and QR codes in the communications to drive like loaded links that signal like, okay, this hit matches this piece of mail that we sent to this address. And then there's also vendors that are providing data around geolocation. So as their devices, and you'll have to tell me about how kosher this is in Europe, but as for instance, if an individual, say a young female enters a bridal shop, and you've geofenced that location, and from their phone data that they have entered that location, that opens up a whole lot of possibilities of uh, different businesses that would be very interested in this individual. And that kind of activity, matching the offline to their behavior and activity on screens, it really fascinates me. And the more we can do of that, the more powerful and timely the marketing messaging can be.
I mean, from a European perspective, it's just down to consent.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
so long as the user has agreed
Hmm.
that the app can track them and track their location, and agreed that the data can be shared, then yeah, I mean, it's all possible. I guess it just reduces the size of the audience.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but I think a few things that you've spoken about using different tools like Make and so on. It sounds like you're sort of kind of building your own composable CDP. Uh, Do you do much with the composable CDP market?
Not yet, but I think you're making me think I probably should. I think that there's some opportunity there. Um, but yeah, I've mostly been operating in the world of um, people that have kind of a discrete need, and how can we cobble together the tech solution around it?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that's the thing is, when you talk about joining online and offline data, bringing those data sets together, potentially modeling those data sets to create audiences that you want to target, whether that's excluding people who are already a customer or retargeting people who, sorry, creating lookalike models, I should say, for high value audiences, and then sharing those with the various DSPs like Meta and the Google Marketing Platform. That was what kind of made me think about that, because you've kind of got these huge monolithic CDPs that do everything, and you pay
Right.
for everything even if you don't need the that functionality. And then you have what you're doing, which is kind of building these things piecemeal based on client need.
Right.
And then, yeah, that feels much more like the kind of cloud-based composable um, CDP space.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Well, I mean, there's opportunity, and I think we're evolving um, as our clients are,
Mm.
and part of this exercise is I really was looking forward to speaking with the two of you and learning from your expertise. I'm wanting to do more and more with data, and love to speak to experts like you. This is very very helpful and illuminating.
Just because I know Matt and I, we've had a lot of experience at Sky, and one of the things that I know that whenever I was getting ready to leave, they created a new box called the Sky Q box, and that they were actually going to be having different advertising. So this household could get this advertising, but this household could get different advertising, even though they're watching the exact same live channel. Now, if they take that same type of level of information and they know that this box already has these products, I remember I would always get "Oh, you could call this number to get Sky Movies." Well, I already have Sky Movies. That's not relevant for me. How about having these different adverts where you change it from a sales perspective to a retention possibility? Say, "Oh, we know you already have you have Sky Movies. Here are the shows that you could be watching." And they already have this rich data set about you. So they know about what type of household you have. So they can actually target to the type of household you are. What type of movies do you like to watch? Do you have kids? That's where I would love to see where companies who already have all this rich data already internally, leveraging it and actually using it in a marketing point of view. Because not everything has to be about sales. It could be about retention.
I think that's a super important point. Is I try to really encourage my clients to think hard about both retention. Sometimes it's a custom project, and so retention turns into repeat business, but then also referral business and incentivizing. Those are two often neglected sources of sales.
And I would love to see, like, in the future, with more and more companies in the smaller ones starting to do a lot more on automation, will the competitive advantages that companies are now benefiting from will no longer see it, and this becomes a new baseline, and that there's going to be something new in the future that's going to come and replace the full automation to predictive automation.
I echo that sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, even as something as small as my podcast.
Yeah.
The title of this episode will most likely change because I will be taking this transcript. I'm gonna pump it into Copilot and actually tell me get it to produce for me five possible titles for this podcast based off of the context of this transcript.
Right. Yeah, it's
So
it's magic.
yeah, and it's one of my lessons learned because I actually created, like, all of the title cards for the last episode that we did, and then I realized I changed the title completely, so now the title that you're gonna see on the podcast versus what I actually put as the podcast episode title are completely different, and I actually feel like I missed the boat on that one.
Well, sometimes done is better than perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
was one of those things it took way too long. Now, Matt, I don't know if you want to or not, but I always ask this on every Digital After Dark now. Matt, who are we sponsored by?
I've gone a bit. What's the word? Basic. I've gone a bit basic today. Actually, no, I can't say that. That's awful. But anyway, I've gone with Heineken. So I'm
There you
moving.
go. There you go.
I'm drinking Heineken this evening. So we're sponsored by Heineken.
Fantastic.
Unofficially, of course.
I mean, one of
Fantastic.
these days we will actually get sponsored, and Matt's gonna wake up one day.
We're never going to get sponsored.
See, I always like to remove the word never. You never know. I mean, we thought we would only have one listener. I believe now we are at two.
At least, if not more. Uh, I was looking at the last YouTube video, and we're at 13 views now. So only 3 or 4 of them are mine.
But I think right there, because I mean, as you heard, Reed, it is now 11 p.m. It's one of the reasons why we call this Digital After Dark, because it is always after dark when we start one of these podcasts. I think it would be great to wrap up because, Reed, you're in the Illinois region, so it's now at the end of the day, technically, it's 5 p.m.
It is. Yes. Yeah. About time my dog's gonna bug me to get fed. So
So I think it's time just to wrap up and just have some final thoughts around this. So, Matt, do you have any final thoughts first?
Yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed having this conversation, and I said this in when we had the podcast with John. I love connecting with people who are outside my immediate kind of area of expertise. And I've really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you, Reed, for joining us. Um,
thank you.
and yeah, no, it's really been really good to have you, and it's been a fantastically interesting conversation. That's my final thought.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, I'm gonna just echo that as well because we normally always talk to digital analysts or stakeholders. So getting a new perspective, especially one that is not going to be so PECR or GDPR re- reliant, where we get it's almost like a peek in the past, what it used to be like back in the day before we had to worry about all the compliance. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's been a new opportunity for us.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I would love to be a little cheeky on this one. So, I'm almost wondering about the Boudoir survey and start thinking about Matt. I think we need to fill out the survey and create a digital after dark calendar for 2026.
I'm appalled by the mental images that are. Yeah, I'm gonna mute myself now. I can't say anymore.
It's also one of my favorite things to do. Read. I do love to leave Matt a little bit speechless.
I'm sure your next podcast will be sponsored by Intimissimi or Victoria's Secret. But
Possibly, or it may be sponsored by looking for a new job because Matt decided that I went a little too far on that joke. Read, any final thoughts for you?
well, this was really valuable for me. I think I share your sentiment, and it's really interesting to have conversations with people that work deep in any area, and particularly in data. This is something that I'm aspiring to be. I'm not a natural data analyst, and um, I would just like to do more. And I'm going to continue to follow your podcast, and any recommendations you have to help build my expertise, I would greatly appreciate. But I mean, I think that's the way we have to be is really reliant on data.
No, and I would say the same. I've found your insights and the way that you're going around things. I found it massively insightful. So again, just any questions you have for me or for Andrew, please just reach out. Um, and similarly, I may reach out to you
Yeah, please do
around a
anytime.
few things that we've spoken about as well, because I think those it's like building community, isn't it? And
Yes,
I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, it's not always about what you know, but who you know.
Yes.
and what they know.
Exactly. I mean, if Copilot doesn't know it, you just reach out to your local expert.
That's right.
Well, Reed, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for the email and suggesting this topic. And if there's anyone else out there that would like to join on, this is definitely going to be a podcast that's going to be a lot more community led. So either going to be a Digital After Dark if Matt joins, or if he is unavailable, it'll be an Intro Talks. But I
All
do
right.
want this to be very much a community led initiative.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Perfect. Thank
Thank you
you,
for joining.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.